you said you mentioned that you do stuff in corporate and film.
So mainly corporate and film. I mean, it tends to be a bit of both. Sometimes TV if it's required, or doing stuff for corporates. Stuff in hospitality, stuff in the finance world, stuff in the art world. So it kind of depends, really.
So tell me a little bit about the process of corporate filmmaking.
Very good question. So the process of corporate filmmaking strategy is absolutely crucial. So you need to really dive deep into the client, find his pain points, find basic commercial challenges, what they're struggling with, what they find difficult to communicate. Potentially they may have a selling problem, or they may have a messaging problem, or they may just want to increase brand awareness. But effectively, having films is crucial to take your business to the next level.
Okay, so can you give me a brief overview of why you wanted to get involved with corporate? What was the sort of main focus for that?
Corporate filmmaking, I think what it does is it allows for you to communicate your ideas in a short, succinct way. It allows for companies or businesses, such as, supermarkets or banks or hotel groups. It allows for something to be communicated in a short, succinct time, and I think it's a very powerful medium. I think if it's done to a certain production level or a certain standard, it can have a massive effect on a business, and it's really exciting to see and harness the power of what a video can do. It can just transform somebody's business overnight, and I find that incredibly exciting and incredibly rewarding.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because people often compare corporate to feature films or like big commercials, and I think a lot of it is still relevant. You still want to tell a story and engage people and have things.
Yeah, good point. Well, I mean, I think it's important to look at where corporate films really started. So I guess if you look in the influence of photography, it was a huge part of it. So in the 1880s, a chap called Edward Maybridge, who was responsible for aligning photographs in a quick sequence. He'd use photographs and he'd gradually change the movement, but have about 2,000 or 3,000 photos, and he'd put them and stick them all together and then play them back, and it would create movement and motion. And that's where kind of the film genre kind of started. So a chap called Jam Handy, who was an Olympian and a swimmer, as a side hustle, put two and two together and was like, hang on a minute, we can make films to promote things. So, he did stuff in the sponsorship world. He promoted Chevrolet cars, and he did stuff for war. During the First World War, he was responsible for creating training videos for pilots. But also was responsible for, doing stuff for medical institutions. And these were all played before movies. They were the first types of adverts that fronted blockbuster cinemas. And then, of course, now we link it to Hollywood. Television was a huge thing that came into fruition, and industry kind of changed and nuanced, and it became more subtle. It became less selly. They wanted to build narrative and storyline. The influence of TV was a huge driver in advertising, because it meant that you could show your advert, show your corporate film in front of a wide variety of people, and it was a highly effective means of communicating a message to the masses. And they were more storyline based, more romantic, had a bit more of a kind of storyline. Traditionally, yeah.
I was going to say, for me, I always the very first thing that was ever shown to an audience in Paris was a video, in terms of film, was a simple video of a train pulling into a station. Yeah. And the people in the audience had never seen a film before, and they got scared and ran out the theatre because they had no concept of what a moving image was. So for me, I always find it interesting, that original impact, that emotional impact that very first film had on people. and how you sort of convey that now, because everything is overdone and everything has sort of gone on and drearied on. So for me, it's how do you emotionally engage people? So that's kind of what I want to get to the core of with you is how do you think something corporate can engage someone?
Yeah, true. I mean, if we look to, earlier corporate films, things were very dry. Normally it would be, if we look to Jam Handy Productions, if you look at the earlier Chevrolet car adverts, it would be, a white man wearing a suit trying to sell a car, and maybe it would be a nice hero shot of the car, but it would be very, very corporate, very stiff, very kind of, selly. It would be a bit like, being attacked by a car salesman if you walk into a car showroom. He was very slick, very dynamic, and was trying to sell you something. And he would sell you something by whether talking about the chassis or the horsepower, and it was a sales pitch on camera. It was a sales pitch, and no one likes to be sold to. So it's all about that shift into creating something more subtle, something more storytelling based, something more anecdotal that I think is so important and, is influenced from that storytelling Hollywood tradition. I mean, what would you say is the difference between corporate and Hollywood in your kind of humble opinion?
For me, I think that everything in Hollywood is in service of a story. So, for instance, when I'm shooting something, everything I shoot is in service of a character. Whereas I think corporate, a lot of it tends to be talking headshots. But I think the interesting challenge of corporate is how do you bring across that character from Hollywood into something more sort of company and financial based. And that's what excites me. Because, for instance, I always see in so many corporate videos, people are so afraid of a cinematic look in terms of everything needs to be lit perfectly and there can't be any shadows, there's no deep contrast. And when I look at that, I'm like bored out of my head. So for me, it's about not being afraid of shadows. It's about embracing your highlights. And I think having some sort of cinematic language is important.
Definitely.
And borrowing that is like something you can use and it can be really effective.
Would you say that you'd want to get inspired by Hollywood filmmaking to bring to your corporate filmmaking? Do you think they both go hand in hand?
I think they should go hand in hand. I think a lot of the time they don't go hand in hand because people have a very certain way that they shoot a corporate film. Let's have one light here and forget about everything else. But for me, I want to be far more considered. Let's have a light here. Let's run it through 5 layers of frost or diffusion. Let's get it really soft. Let's maybe wrap the light around. Let's get a hair light. Something that is fresh compared to what you see in a standard corporate setup.
That's true. I mean, would you say that these days a corporate film doesn't have to look so nice? It doesn't have to be so. What I find quite interesting is that you were saying that a lot of corporate films are, bright and commercial and colourful and, big light in your face, and it's almost a bit unnatural.
Yeah, completely.
Would you say that, if in fact, rough and ready, dirty, muddy, kind of a bit unnatural, would you say that almost is a more effective way of portraying your message?
I think it depends what the brand and what the...
Or shoot on your iPhone.
Well, I was going to say, I think 100% it depends what the brand message is. Everyone can pick up a camera and a single light and go shoot, but I think being considered and careful, and I want to say take a Hollywood approach, but I just mean be very cautious in the way you approach things and very particular. I think that is how you separate yourself from other people. And for me, it's also, yes, it's about taking examples from people, but it's also very much so about developing your own style. No one likes to be told their work looks like someone else's. You want to have your own approach and be like, oh, that looks like Alex Ramsey, or that looks like Oliver Mould. I think that's what the goal is.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, 100%. So, corporate films are everywhere, but if you can try and find ways to differentiate yourself.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to not make it boring. And being particular about that makes it not boring.
And it's funny, I think a lot of corporate films that are boring these days, I mean, films I mean, what do I know? I'm in the corporate film industry myself, and I see many films, and they kind of take from, you know, when corporate films, dare I say it, first came to fruition. Normally, it is somebody trying to sell you something. It is somebody talking about what they can offer. So there are parallels between when corporate films first begun in the 1900s to now. So if you can try and find ways to differentiate, and what I say is, and I've always say this, include stories, try and add as many anecdotal stories, a beginning, middle, and an end, with somebody that has charisma and conviction and speaks well to camera, you've got yourself a piece of content that will relate to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody will understand and enjoy it because people love a story. You know, we've been telling stories since the start of man. When you have those two ingredients, a great presenter, confident and eloquent and speaks well, doesn't have to be totally in your face and crazy and a bit, you know, mad, but just somebody that, you know, takes to the camera well and have a beginning, middle and an end. It can be a highly effective way of communicating your message. So what I like to do is I like to just dig deep into stories, and every business, every entrepreneur has a story, let's say, but what I try to get them to do is avoid telling me the ins and outs of the business. Just try and tell me a story. Take me for a gentle ride. Take me for a gentle viewing.
Yeah, I think you've just hit the nail on the head. You know, no one wants to see, I mean, yes, there's a place for it, you know, especially financial business where you need the hard statistics. But I think so much of it is about actually making people care. And you can't do that without an engaging person or a story. So obviously, you know, when you work on corporate, your budgets aren't as big as production or big commercials. So how do you make the most out of a budget that you're given? What would you say the steps are that you take creatively and logistically?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, so budgets in filmmaking have been decreased. Traditionally in advertising, you'd spend millions of pounds on a campaign, but then you also spend about £10 on a campaign if you really want to. So it's all about finding that happy medium and what works for the client. I find being creative with the budget is always very important. These days we can, you know, make a film in our bedroom if we really want to. We have access to the Adobe Creative Suite that allows us to do Adobe, first starting with the PDF and now editing movies. And it's all for £15 a month or whatever it is. So we've got the capacity to create something really special. So to start off with, obviously, I think possible on a smaller budget, I think creativity should always come first. So what we were talking about in terms of storytelling. So you can make a film, obviously, but spend time in pre-production. Pre-production is the first part of the production. So as I was saying, really try to iron out the story, make it interesting, compelling, work out the shots, work so it looks coherently, practice, put things in place, be creative about it, because that's what will make a good film. In terms of production, obviously, having a nice fancy camera is great, but you know, these days you can make films from your iPhone. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be very good quality wise. You know, it'll kind of probably give you a lack of professionalism, and people will just think, oh well, you know, he's being careless. But if you have the stories and the pre-production and the script and you're creative with your shots done on your iPhone, you can probably create something substandard.
I think these days, if something's well lit and considered, even on an iPhone, if you know what you're doing, you can make something look amazing.
Lighting also is a very important thing as well. And also, if we go to the post-production, you know, editing I find, we've had years of editing experience. I've had years of editing experience. I think with editors, it's about putting in the reps, isn't it? It's like, you know, just being a nerd, being in your room, cutting things, adding music, playing around, changing things. You've got to really, you know, people can pick up an editing suite on their phone these days, but to really be a good editor, to tell stories through editing, you need to, in my opinion, put in reps.
It's about hours.
You know, it's about hours. Otherwise, you're just going to create something a bit substandard, look a bit amateurish. So I think getting really good at your craft is a really, really good thing to make films on a budget.
I think any level of filmmaking, if you collaborate with people and different people and learn their way of working and take certain aspects of that and add that to what makes you unique, I think that's really important.
Yes, definitely.
Not being set on, oh, this is my way of doing things. I think being open and receptive to feedback and just little things that other people do that you might be able to take away is really important.
Yeah. And also, not that we necessarily endorse stock footage.
Yeah.
But obviously that has completely changed the dynamic of filmmaking.
How so? How would you say it's changed the dynamic of filmmaking?
So stock footage traditionally was very expensive. So to buy a stock footage clip, whether it be, a shot of Big Ben or, a lovely drone shot in the Atlantic Ocean, it would be hundreds and hundreds of pounds. But now, of course, with the invention of subscription websites and the creative economy, creators, videographers, filmmakers can have a business and put forward their footage to a big platform, and you can subscribe to a website and get unlimited clips. So
do you think that removes creativity or encourages creativity?
I think it maybe creates a bit of a lethargic, lazy way of filmmaking, I think personally. I think stock footage is very good these days because these creators now have a platform to share their work, and I think it's a great way to get people out filming. But if you want to do a distinct and creative piece of work combined with your own filmmaking, I think it can ruin a film if there's too much of it and it's overly saturated.
Of course.
Stock footage has great production value, but I feel that if you're trying to create a professional piece of work, suddenly seeing stock footage, we're bombarded with it on LinkedIn, we're bombarded with it on Instagram, we're bombarded with it, and people, I think, look at you in a certain way, being like, oh, he used stock footage,
yes,
he must not be very good. It also, people don't use it creatively enough as well. I think people just plop in a drone shot at the beginning and then, have a craply lit interview with your iPhone, and then they call that a masterpiece. It's not going to communicate professionalism.
Yeah, I think it comes back to what you're saying is putting in the reps yourself and learning. Because if you're constantly taking footage and not filming it yourself, you don't learn anything.
Yeah.
For me, I also think there's a reason in any sort of production, you tend to have one director of photography and one director throughout the whole thing. It's so that it has a cohesive identity and vision. And if you're plopping stock footage in, suddenly it looks different. No matter how nicely you grade it and how much the grade matches, it's always going to be a different feel to that footage because it's not one person, it's someone else's. Yeah. So I think you lose a lot of identity when you start just plopping in stock footage, especially into corporate or advertising, whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, you do, totally. And also a lot of these footages, you say, have an inbuilt colour, kind of saturation. A lot of the time it's very vibrant and colourful, and if you're combining it with another piece of footage, it can look very, very bizarre and off-putting and jarring.
No, I completely agree, but I would say it's even deeper than that. If you even match it somehow, just the way someone operates a camera or their eye is completely different to another person's. So the look is just off. But, for instance, I watch and learn from a lot of DP podcasts. So, for instance, like Conrad Hall is a big inspiration of mine. He did Road to Perdition, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And there's such a strong vision to that film. Like every shot you see, you can tell is captured by the same person. And I think that's so admirable. It's having such a strong identity in your work that it's so easily identifiable by anyone.
Yeah. How would you, so are you saying that you'd approach a corporate film a bit like a director of photography?
Yeah, completely. I mean, my experience is very much film and commercial based. Everything I've worked on has been film, commercial, music video. so naturally, my natural inclination when it comes to lighting and camera work is to be considered, and how does this serve the brand or the person or the director's vision or the brief. So yeah, for me, it's so much about embracing the creativity and not being like, let's just plop a light and just make sure it looks fine. You know, let's dig deeper. Let's make this creative and really engaging.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you can do so much with lighting. I mean, it can make you look 30 years older or 20 years younger.
Yeah.
It can go either way, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean,
how about from a filming perspective?
for me, you know, I don't approach it like, let's make this person look younger or older. There's a very famous director of photography called Greg Fraser, and he did this film called Zero Dark 30, where there's a scene where this person's tied up in a warehouse, and it's pitch black. You don't see anything. And these people open the door, and it's just this ray of light that floods in through the room, and it's completely overexposed in the door frame, but perfectly exposed on this hostage. And for me, it's so considered, and it's like this ray of light is drowning this victim. And instead of it being heavenly, it's terrifying. And I think stuff like that is just is what I would love to incorporate in the corporate world, because I feel like it's so lacking. Not that situation with the hostage, you understand, but like just that kind of consideration is so important to me.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, exposure, obviously, brightness of the shot, you know, and most cameras these days, obviously not iPhones, but you know, you can communicate how bright your shot is through exposure. So you kind of turn off the automatic functions, and suddenly you have full reins to make it brighter or make it darker, whatever you want. So are you saying that shot in particular you think is very, very bright?
It is completely overblown, as in you cannot see any detail.
And what was that? That shot in particular?
Yeah.
It like why? But surely it lacks professionalism if it's completely overblown. I.e., it's too bright.
Yeah.
You lose quality. You lose detail of the shots.
I think once you're a master of the rules, you can break the rules. And for that to be completely overexposed it communicates this vision of this person hasn't seen light for days, for months, for weeks, for years. So we're feeling what they feel. They can't see outside because their eyes aren't used to that level of light anymore. And it's just, that's the level of consideration. Yeah. It's like, that is completely intentional.
So what are we looking at? Can you describe the shot in more detail?
So we're behind this hostage in a room.
Yeah.
It's pitch black.
Yeah.
And these people, after weeks or months, open this door and they walk in, and they've opened it to the desert outside, and it's just a white light flooding into this room. And it's completely overblown, but rightly exposed in the room, but the actual doorway is completely overblown. And it's just like, that is so considered to me. That is genius. It's like the purest level of filmmaking and understanding of a character. And I love it.
Storytelling is a huge part. Don't overuse stock footage, and being creative. Creative filmmaking is a huge part of the process, and for years people have tried to be creative, and it's always the creative work that stands out. The use of stock footage probably won't allow us to be that creative. It'll create a kind of, you know, an automated kind of mode where things will start to look the same. But I think we can conclude that being creative and getting in the reps is the best way forward in creating a piece of content or a film that lasts for years to come.
Where would you like to be in Horse's Mouth?
Oh, good question. So I think doing more commercials, doing more adverts, and telling more stories. Just being able to put our name behind content that we're incredibly proud about is the most rewarding thing ever.
Cool. Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you.